You can run, you can hide, but you'll never truly escape the fate that awaits you if you try to sail in the Black Sea. That's the message that Ukraine has sent to Russia. A country that has no real navy to speak of has spent much of the war that Russia started negating the impact of the dreaded Russian Black Sea fleet. With its ever-expanding arsenal of drones and missiles, Ukraine has made that fleet a near non-factor, and it's only going to get worse for Russia. Why? Ukraine owns the Black Sea, as its fleet of sea drones is now receiving new capabilities that will make them more lethal than ever before. Putin's navy is too afraid to leave the port, and it has every right to be. It knows that explosive death on a scale never seen before awaits it if it does leave. Defense Express reports that an unnamed officer who is part of the defense intelligence of Ukraine has claimed that Russia is so scared of sending its warships into the Black Sea that it's keeping them as close to its ports as possible. That officer, who goes by the call sign 13th, says that Ukraine's unmanned fleet of seaborne drones is the reason why Russia's ships aren't sailing. Their effect has been so pronounced that Russia has effectively abandoned all of its major military operations in the Black Sea, and it's been reduced to launching missiles from the warships it has left before those ships scurry back into their hiding places. 13th spoke to the Associated Press in December to report that Russia is basically inactive in a stretch of water that it thought it would control when Vladimir Putin launched his supposed special military operation. Today we've likely reached a plateau, the shadowy officer claimed, suggesting that the Black Sea conflict is now effectively at a stalemate due to Ukraine's drones. We are effectively limiting the enemy's movements, but those dramatic, high-profile strikes we saw earlier haven't happened for quite some time. That's because the enemy has adapted. The adaptations aren't as impressive as you might think. Russia hasn't come up with novel new defenses that protect its warships from Ukraine's unmanned surface vehicles or USVs. No equipment that can help Russia's crews to see these drones coming is being installed on the ships, nor are weapons being deployed that can take out Ukraine's USVs before they wreak havoc on the ships they target. Instead, Russia's adaptation to the Ukrainian USV problem is to play games of peekaboo with its warships. As Defense Express notes, all that those ships now do is travel no further than 40 kilometers or about 24.8 miles away from their ports to launch long-range missiles at Ukraine before heading back. The US Naval Institute says that the Black Sea has a surface area of 169,000 square miles, making it the world's 49th largest sea. Russia is exploiting barely any of that water, and Ukraine's USVs are the reason why. All Russia can do is launch missiles from its ships at the few coastal regions that those ships can reliably target mere miles away from their ports. The majority of these strikes focus on Odessa, with a particular focus on the ports in the Danube region, TSN reports. These attacks and Ukraine's own Black Sea strikes haven't been enough to prevent commercial traffic, as over 200 vessels enter or leave the Black Sea region per month. But even the fact that those commercial ships can move as freely as they do is yet another sign that the Black Sea Fleet, which was supposed to dominate that sea that lends the fleet its name, has utterly failed to do its job. And Russia's situation in the Black Sea is only going to get worse from here. Ukraine is developing new generations of USVs that can cause even more damage than those it's already using. We'll come back to those new drones a little later in the video. For now, it's worth examining the Black Sea situation as it was before the war, and how it became once the war had started, to highlight just how deep Russia's humiliation runs. After all, Russia was never supposed to be in a position where its warships could do nothing more than occasionally emerge from their ports to launch missiles. The Black Sea Fleet was supposed to dominate. It ended up doing anything but. If you had told somebody that this would be the situation before the war began, they may have laughed in your face. Ukraine, as impressive as its military has become during the last few years, hasn't really been a naval power of any respectable sort ever since Putin illegally annexed Crimea in 2014. That annexation granted Russia control of the Crimean port of Sevastopol, which the Imperial War Museum points out was, and still is, home of the Black Sea Fleet. A port that was once the home to almost all of Ukraine's naval power is now controlled by Putin, along with the ships that represented the biggest threat that Ukraine could have mustered had the annexation not taken place. Russia captured at least 100 of the Ukrainian Navy's warships when it took Sevastopol and the other Crimean ports. And though 35 of those warships were later withdrawn from Crimea and returned to mainland Ukraine, many of those that Russia kept became part of the Black Sea Fleet, were supposed to terrorize Ukraine when Putin launched his invasion. Ukraine ended up barely having a navy to speak of. It still doesn't really have a navy. According to Global Firepower, which publishes annual rankings of the world's military nations based on dozens of factors, Ukraine's navy has 89 assets, with none being the types of warships Ukraine could use to assert a traditional form of naval dominance in the Black Sea. There are no aircraft carriers, destroyers, frigates, or corvettes in Ukraine's navy, according to Global Firepower. All the country has is 3 mine warfare vessels, 33 patrol ships, and 56 other undefined assets that aren't even powerful enough for Global Firepower to consider them. Contrast that to the Black Sea Fleet before the Ukraine war, and you'll immediately see why many assumed that the Black Sea was as good as Russian early on. The Foreign Policy Institute says that Russia had been modernizing the Black Sea Fleet even before the annexation of Crimea as part of its 2011 to 2020 State Defense Plan. The period including the 2010s and up to Putin's February 2022 invasion of Ukraine also saw Russia add a trio of frigates, 6 small attack submarines, and 4 missile corvettes to the fleet. Those additions alone packed far more firepower than anything that the Ukrainian Navy could send into the Black Sea, with the corvettes also being capable of launching Russia's Caliber cruise missiles. As the Institute puts it, theoretically, the aggregated firepower of these vessels would allow the BSF, or Black Sea Fleet, to deliver a salvo of 92 cumulated Caliber missiles, which is, for comparison, as much as one Arleigh Burke-type US Navy destroyer. Ukraine wasn't supposed to stand a chance in the Black Sea. But almost 4 years into the Ukraine war, Russia has been reduced to using these warships for the occasional missile strike, and it has virtually no presence in the Black Sea beyond its own ports. What happened? Simply put, Ukraine's USVs. When the rest of the world was focused on traditional naval power and strategy, Ukraine was developing seaborne drones and new missiles that it could use to strike Russia's Black Sea warships. Ukraine didn't just target the weakest ships in the fleet either. Major warships started dropping like flies, as Defense Express explains. Ukrainian maritime drones have previously struck high-value targets, including the amphibious assault ship Cesar Kunikov, the missile corvette Ivanovets, and the missile cruiser Moskva in April 2022, the outlet says. The Moskva in particular was a major early loss for the Black Sea Fleet, as it was the fleet's flagship missile cruiser. Ukraine managed to take it out within the first few months of the Ukraine invasion starting, setting the stage for a campaign to follow that would devastate the rest of Russia's dreaded fleet. Ukraine took out the Moskva using its Neptune anti-ship missiles, but later Black Sea Fleet casualties would come as a result of the explosive warheads packed into Ukraine's drones. As the National Security Journal reports, Ukraine started launching combined missile and drone assaults on Sevastopol after experiencing its early success in the Black Sea. Russia clearly thought that this port was a safe haven, having underestimated Ukraine's long-range strike capabilities, buoyed by support from its Western allies. Between 2022 and 2024, Ukraine claims to have hit at least 20 Black Sea vessels with these attacks, the journal states. Other outlets, such as the US Naval Institute, say that Ukraine had managed to take out a third of the entire Black Sea Fleet in 2024, forcing Russia to push its warships as far back as the Sea of Azov to avoid getting hit. Russia's Black Sea humiliation was complete. The overwhelming force that was supposed to rule the Black Sea waves was reduced to a series of ships that repeatedly relocated to get away from Ukraine's missiles and drones. The fleet is still active in the Black Sea, the National Security Journal says. The fleet's submarines still patrol the sea's waters, and the warships peeking out of their ports that we've already mentioned are still active. But these are limited naval operations from a fleet that was supposed to be in full control of the Black Sea. And as 13th points out, nothing has changed as we approach the end of 2025. Ukraine intends to keep it that way. That's where the drones that we mentioned earlier come into play. Defense Express highlights the Magura family of USVs, noting that the DIU operates 2 versions. The Magura V5 is a ramming drone, meaning it can be loaded with a warhead and then sent to sink a warship. As for the Magura V7, that drone is a weapons platform that Ukraine has armed with surface-to-air missiles, capable of striking the helicopters, fighter jets, and missiles that are sent Ukraine's way via Crimea. Both are remotely controlled using a console the size of a suitcase. Those consoles come with screens, joysticks, and security systems, essentially making it easy for drone operators to figure out what they need to do to get the most out of the Magura. And making the most out of the Maguras is exactly what Ukraine has done. In August 2024, the Royal United Services Institute, or RUSI, proclaimed that uncrewed platforms like the Magura are critical to Ukraine's past and ongoing success against Russia's Black Sea Fleet. The think tank makes mention of the Sea Baby drones too, which are used by the Security Service of Ukraine, or SBU. It's difficult to conceive of a way in which the same effect could be achieved with crewed platforms. In particular, the ability to put the Russian fleet at risk throughout the entire Black Sea, including close to the Russian coast, where the full might of the Russian military can be brought to bear, RUSI says when speaking about the impact of Ukraine's drones in the Black Sea. The Foundation for Political, Economic and Social Research, or CETA, shares that opinion. stating that Ukraine's USVs have produced a measurable shift in the balance of naval power in the Black Sea. CETA highlights some of the advantages that Ukraine's drones have over Russia's warships, including their speed and small stature, the latter of which makes the drones incredibly difficult to detect before it's too late for Russia's ships to do anything about them. Using these drones, Ukraine has curtailed the freedom of movement that most thought the Black Sea Fleet would enjoy during the war, which has in turn undermined Russia's ability to project power with its once feared fleet. We see that from 13th's comments. A fleet that is essentially in hiding because of Ukraine's drones isn't a fleet that is to be feared. The fact that Ukraine is no longer carrying out the headline-grabbing strikes that 13th mentions is as much to do with it no longer needing to as it is to Russia's weak adaptations to Ukraine's drones. As 13th says of Russia's fleet, they constantly hide, and in a way, that's also a result of our unit, because you can imagine the cost of maintaining a fleet that cannot operate at sea. But Ukraine isn't resting on its laurels. Soon it will have USVs that may not even need to be guided by an operator patrolling the Black Sea. 13th says that the next stage of Ukraine's USV evolution is coming fast, and it will be a stage that sees Ukraine rely heavily on artificial intelligence or AI to present an even greater threat to Russia's warships. Right now, target search is a combined process, part operator, part AI. In the future, you'll launch the drone and it will independently search for a target, distinguish civilian vessels from military ones, and make more of the decisions. Ukraine has also managed to gather a huge amount of operational data thanks to the exploits of its naval drone operators, meaning the future that 13th speaks of may arrive faster than anybody thinks. In fact, AI-powered USVs are already operating in the Black Sea, though they are perhaps not quite yet as capable as 13th claims that the future drones will be. In October, Defense News reported that Ukraine's Secret Service had unveiled an upgraded version of the Sea Baby drone mentioned earlier. This upgrade boosted the drone's range from 620 miles to 930 miles, with the drone also being capable of carrying a payload weighing up to 4,400 pounds. That combination of range, which makes the entire Black Sea traversable, and firepower wasn't enough to send Russia's warships even deeper into hiding, the new Sea Baby will also have variants that include versions that are fitted with machine gun turrets and multiple launch rocket systems. As for the AI, an SBU brigadier general named Ivan Lukashevich claims that the new Sea Baby drones will have a friend or foe targeting system that is assisted by AI. Lukashevich also claims that the new drones will also be capable of launching aerial attack drones, and that they feature a multi-layered self-destruct mechanism that prevents Russia from capturing and learning from the drones. It's unclear what, if any, role AI will play in these functions. But even with the targeting system, we see the Sea Baby taking a step closer to the future that 13th says is coming. And if these features are being installed on the Sea Baby, it's likely safe to assume that Ukraine's Magura drones will be getting similar upgrades soon, if they haven't already. Ukraine is also working with overseas partners to develop new sea drones. In October, United 24 media reported that the Ukrainian state defense company Ukroboronprom had signed a deal with a US-based company named Levanta Tech Inc. That deal will see the two organizations cooperate on the development of a new sea drone that could have a range of over 3,000 miles and a warhead weighing a ton. Imagine that new drone with the AI features 13th discussed, and the Russian ships that are already scared of leaving their Black Sea ports could even become targets within their hiding places. With all of this drone technology in the development pipeline, the future of the Black Sea conflict is going to look very different from what we've seen thus far in the war. There is already evidence of that from the comments made by 13th about lack of major Ukrainian strikes against Russian warships. But with the Black Sea being controlled by Ukraine's drones, the door has been opened for Ukraine to strike against other Russian naval assets such as the Shadow Fleet. This fleet, which is primarily made up of aging tankers and similar vessels, was amassed by Putin as a response to Western sanctions, making it difficult for Russia's licensed ships to transport oil and other cargo around the world. Shadow Fleet ships purposefully obscure their origins, and they play a massive role in keeping cash flowing into Russia, with that money then being taxed for use by Russia in the Ukraine war. It's difficult to place a dollar value on the cargo that Russia's Shadow Fleet has shipped since the beginning of Putin's invasion, owing to the secretive nature of the fleet. However, enough of these ships have been identified by the UK between the beginning of 2024 and May 2025 for the UK government to place sanctions on up to 100 of Russia's shady vessels. Deep Sea Reporter claims that these sanctioned ships have transported cargo valued at more than $24 billion during the mentioned period, which gives us a hint about just how lucrative the Shadow Fleet has been for Russia. With no more warships to target in the Black Sea, at least right now, Ukraine is switching its focus to these Shadow Fleet ships. In doing so, it's trying to chip away at one of the most important financial lifelines that Russia has, all with the aim of weakening Putin's war machine over time. The last 2 weeks have been particularly productive for Ukraine on the Shadow Fleet front. On November 30th, the BBC reported that Ukraine's naval drones had scored successful hits on a pair of oil tankers as they traveled through the Black Sea. Those tankers, named the Kairos and Virat, were both sailing off the Turkish coast. Fast forward to December 10th, and Ukraine was at it again. On that date, CNN reported on Ukraine's SBU claiming a strike against another Shadow Fleet tanker operating in the Black Sea. Named the Dashan, the tanker was sailing under the flag of the Comoros Islands and suffered critical damage, according to the SBU. Footage shared by CNN also shows a massive fireball engulfing the tanker, presumably due to the Sea Baby drone that appears to have struck the ship's stern. These strikes wouldn't be happening if the Black Sea Fleet was in any way active. Now, the very drones that have turned that fleet into a non-factor are turning their destructive force against Russia's other ships. Putin is infuriated by Ukraine's new focus on his Shadow Fleet. Novaya Gazeta reports that Russia's president has threatened to institute a naval blockade that will cut Ukraine off from the sea in response to the attacks on the Kairos and Virat. The armed forces of Ukraine are now committing acts of piracy, Putin raged, before adding, the most radical solution would be to cut off Ukraine from the sea, effectively making it impossible for it to engage in piracy at all. I hope that Ukraine's military leadership, political leadership, and those who support them will think again about whether to continue this practice. Putin's threats aren't credible, given the state of the Black Sea Fleet today. For a naval blockade to be instituted now, the ships that are hiding away in Russian ports would have to actually enter the Black Sea again. If that happens, you won't need 3 guesses to figure out what the next targets for Ukraine's Magura and Sea Baby drones will be. Russia can't even strengthen the Black Sea Fleet without permission from Turkey, which controls the straits that lead into the sea and has barred all warship passage since Putin launched his invasion. It's possible that Russia would use a combination of aerial drones, missiles, and its own USVs to attack Ukraine's commercial ships, but that wouldn't be a blockade. It would be an escalation to purposeful strikes on civilian vessels that the entire world would see. Even Putin and his cronies may not have the stomach for that, not due to any sense of compassion, but because conducting such strikes would be a disaster for Russia from a geopolitical perspective. We mentioned the Kairos and Virat several times, but we haven't gone into detail about how Ukraine managed to strike these Shadow Fleet ships. You can learn more about what Ukraine did in our video covering the strikes. And if you enjoyed this video, remember to subscribe to the Military Show for more coverage of the Black Sea situation and Ukraine's latest naval drones. And thank you for watching.